Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, I will now continue the unfinished story. Chapter 16, Heading Out, 3. Young master, are you heading over there? Ron approached him as soon as he stepped out of the carriage. Who will go if I don't? Ron and the vice captain started to chase after Cale, who was heading toward the incident location without any hesitation. The two surrounded Cale, as if the world was going to end soon, but Cale did not care. A man slowly walked out of the other carriage. Vanyan Stan. Cale started to frown deeply as soon as he saw him. There was only one line in the file that his father Count Deruth gave him regarding Vanyan Stan's personality. A typical and authoritative noble. Cale, well, Kim Roksu, could also use the information from The Birth of a Hero to evaluate Vanyan. Your typical villain. However, it was quite a headache to meet that typical villain in real life, than it was as a character in a novel. Cale could not beat someone up for doing something bad or because he didn't like them like Choi Han could. The situation had already escalated a bit by the time Cale arrived. In those few short moments, Choi Han had already become so angry that his shoulders were shaking violently. How can you get in the way of a noble person like that? What the hell are you saying when someone could have gotten hurt? Who was in the way? This only happened because you were driving the carriage like a maniac. Peasants should move out of the way when they see a noble's carriage. It is not my fault that this peasant was so stupid he just stood there without moving. Choi Han was arguing with one of Vanyan's lackeys, and Hans, who had been standing next to Choi Han, had a frown on his face as he approached Cale and whispered into his ear. Choi Han Nim seems to be extremely agitated. Han seemed to have already realized that the owner of the carriage belonged to the Marquis family. He also seemed to have realized that the person standing behind that lackey was none other than Vanyan Stan. That narcissist probably only stepped out of the carriage because he saw the symbol of the Henituse family on Cale's carriage. Enough. Vanyan, the man with beautiful blonde hair, gently spoke to his lackey. As soon as Vanyan's words came out, the lackey quickly moved behind Vanyan, as if he had never been angry in the first place. Only Choi Han was left huffing and puffing while consoling the scared old man. Tisk Cale clicked his tongue. The lackey wasn't actually angry. He was pretty far away from Cale's carriage, but just like Vanyan, he probably saw the golden turtle on Cale's carriage. That was why he was exaggerating, being extremely loud while scolding Choi Han, so that it will draw Cale out to the scene. Hans knew what the lackey was doing, which led him to frown while waiting for Cale to arrive. Cale glared at Vanyan and the lackey before putting a hand on Choi Han's shoulder. You too. But Cale knew why Choi Han was angry. This place was very similar to Harris village, his second home. He was angry at the fact that these people put someone else's life in danger but didn't show even an iota of remorse, or any signs of apologizing. However, the victim in this, the old man, was unable to get angry. It was because he did not have anything to support him like Choi Han had. They could have used another road, but decided not do so and could have hurt someone. How can I just let this be? Cale put some pressure to push down on Choi Han's shoulder. Calm down. Choi Han's black pupils looked directly at Cale. Cale could see the angry Choi Han, no, to be specific, the Choi Han that was being held down by the memories of Harris village, starting to calm down. After verifying that Choi Han was calming down, Cale turned his gaze to look at Vanyan Stan. Beautiful blonde hair and a slight smile on his lips. Perfectly ironed attire without a single wrinkle. Boots without a single scuff mark. However, the thing that caught Cale's attention was the small amount of red at the tip of Vanyan's white dress shirt. Some blood must have landed on him while he was enjoying watching the black dragon being tortured. A crazy bastard. This Vanyan Stan was someone who enjoyed his meal while watching the torturer whip the black dragon until it was covered with blood. Nice to meet you. Are you someone from Count Henituse's household? Yes. Nice to meet you, young Master Vanyan Stan. As expected, the other party knew of Cale. Vanyan was not someone who had an easy life in reaching the heir position. The problem was that he was quite a bit rude. Vanyan Stan was the type that could gently smile at you, but you still feel nothing but disgust for him. I have not had any reason to come to this area, and have only heard stories, but I heard there was someone in the Count's family who was a free spirit and did not seem like a noble. Vanyan smiled as he observed Cale. It was a very annoying look, as if he was trying to start something. I heard that young Master Cale Henituse had been taking part in all of the gatherings of the nobles since last year. Why ask something you already know about? Cale was not talented in these kinds of small talk. That was why he smiled brightly and respectfully answered. Yes. I am indeed that trash. Trash. The moment that word personally came out of Cale's mouth, Vanyan's lackey flinched. One of the trashiest of all of the trash probably. The corner of Vanyan's mouth started to twist up. His expression seemed to say that he had never seen such a crazy person before, but Cale did not care. Marquis Stan was someone who was strong enough to lead a faction, but Vanyan could not do as he pleased with other nobles until he was officially proclaimed as the future successor of the Marquis title. A Marquis would normally officially proclaim a child as their successor in order to provide protection to that child, as well as have that child start building their network at an early age. However, Marquis Stan had not done that yet. There are still 3 other children. Vanyan had 2 younger sisters and 1 younger brother. The Marquis enjoyed watching the competition between the siblings. Vanyan enjoyed watching the black dragon being tortured in order to de-stress from the competition with his siblings. The Marquis considered the competition between his children to be like an exciting sport. Naturally, the crippled eldest son was the result of this competition. It was a completely crazy household. Our Henituse family is an extremely great family in comparison. You're a very interesting person. Vanyan just casually responded to Cale's statement. The wealthy count, who resided in the outskirts of the northeast without being a part of any faction. Who would try to develop a relationship with that family? If anything, people would just be greedy to take that land as their own. However, Vanyan didn't like Cale as a person. The trash eldest son and a pretty smart younger son. Knowing about Cale and Basin's relationship made Vanyan think of his own older brother when looking at Cale. However, Vanyan kept up the act of a proper noble, and handed the reins of this incident to Cale. An unexpected obstacle has made me waste time, but I guess it was a pretty good thing since I got to make your acquaintance, young Master Cale. An unexpected obstacle. Vanyan was referring to the old man. He was disappointed at the fact that his time was wasted because of this old man, and wanted to finish this on a happy note. But it looks like you need to teach your subordinate to clearly distinguish between the people who have the right to travel across this road and this earth, as well as the people who have the right to make them stop. As a well-known Marquis' unofficial successor, this was the most he could do to the trash of a count's family. His tone was saying that, although they were both young masters, their statuses were completely different. Of course, Cale was quietly listening, but he wasn't the type to pay attention to a dog's yapping. Vanyan finished what he had to say and looked toward the most uncomfortable-looking person in the group. Plop. The old man kneeled on the ground once Vanyan looked in his direction and bowed his head. My apologies. The hands of the old man, who was bowing so low that his head could touch the ground, were shaking. Choi Han's hands were shaking as he watched the old man apologize. Each territory's residents would be shaped by the personality of the reigning noble. With the viscount of this territory being one of Marquis Stan's dogs, they were also very authoritative and looked down on the commoners. The corners of Vanyan's lips started to go up. He was satisfied. After observing Vanyan, Cale called out to him. Young Master Vanyan. Once Vanyan turned his head, Cale asked him a question. Are you done? I am. Cale crouched down. His expensive clothes started to touch the ground. He then looked toward the shaking hands of the old man. It'll be dangerous if this continues. Cale was certain that he heard it. The sound of Choi Han taking a deep breath. That had to be the sound of him holding back his anger. The moment Cale heard it, he could feel chills on the back of his neck, and felt that if this continued any longer, the one to get beaten to a pulp would not be himself, but Vanyan. It didn't matter to him whether or not Vanyan was beaten to a pulp, but Choi Han could not punch a noble while he was associated with him. Cale put a hand on the old man's shoulder. Vanyan's eyebrows started to twitch. A noble's hand was on a commoner's shoulder. Old man. The old man seemed to be extremely shocked as he lifted his head to look at Cale. Why, yes. Cale casually asked. Where's the bar? Where can I get some delicious alcohol? As you've heard, I am trash. I don't feel refreshed in the morning if I don't have something to drink. I need to drink to make sure tomorrow is another great day. So. Cale lifted the old man's upper body up. Vanyan, who had been watching Cale, quietly judged Cale and shook his head after hearing Cale mention alcohol. Making eye contact with the shaking pupils of the old man, Cale started to frown as he continued. Are you not going to get up? The old man hesitated and looked back and forth between Vanyan and Cale. Cale just ignored him as he got back up and reached out the hand that had been on a commoner's shoulder toward Vanyan. It was nice meeting you today, young Master Vanyan. Cale was asking for a handshake. Vanyan quietly stood there and looked at Cale. At that moment, one of Vanyan's servants urgently approached them and whispered quietly to Vanyan. However, it was loud enough for everyone to hear. Young master, we have been delayed enough already. Do not interrupt a conversation between nobles. Vanyan looked down at his servant without a smile on his face, and the servant quickly bowed. Vanyan smiled once again as he grabbed Cale's hand. I will just be on my way then, as I am very busy. He then let go. It was a very short handshake. Cale started to smile like a drunk person, as he responded back. If we happen to meet in the capital, let's have a drink together. I do not think we would appreciate the same thing, but sure. Vanyan's smile was lukewarm. Cale decided to do something big to finish this conversation. Yes. Based on our interaction today, it truly looks like only young Master Vanyan deserves to be the future patriarch of the Stan family. You are a very cool person. Patriarch. That word made Vanyan's eyes get cloudy. As Cale expected, Vanyan started to smile brightly once again, and offered praises for Cale as well. Young Master Cale is also a very interesting and free-spirited person. Let us meet again in the future. No, I have no desire to see you ever again. Even if I do, it will be from far, far away. Cale hid his true feelings and nodded his head. Vanyan quickly got back on his carriage, as if he was truly busy, and disappeared. Cale watched the carriage disappear before patting Choi Han's shoulder. Half of the nobles are like that. Choi Han's shoulders flinched at Cale's words, but Cale was already crouching in front of the old man again. Old man. You can't get up? Did you hurt your leg? Pat pat. Cale inspected the old man's body as he said that. He did not seem to be injured. Cale started to observe the man with a confused expression. He then called Choi Han over. Instead of responding, Choi Han just looked at the back of the crouching Cale. You take this old man home. No, I am okay. That bar you were talking about. No need. I'm not in the mood to drink. Cale stopped the old man from trying to lead him to a bar, and looked toward Choi Han, who was standing next to him. Since you saved him, might as well do it all the way and take him safely back home. Choi Han's mouth opened and closed a couple of times, but he could not say anything. At that moment, the old man's voice filled Cale's ears. "My place sells alcohol." "Old man, your place was a bar." Cale's eyes showed that he was really surprised. The old man awkwardly smiled, but continued to speak in a slightly more relaxed expression. "Yes, sir. It is this village's only inn. It has a bar and a restaurant as well. Since it is the only inn, that must be the best place." Hans. Even without Cale saying anything else, Hans quickly approached the old man and helped him up, before starting to ask about the inn. Once the two of them started to move, things started to get rowdy around them. Ron quickly approached Cale and brushed the dirt off Cale's clothes. The vice captain and the rest of the group headed toward the village entrance. The only people left there were Cale and Choi Han. "Cale Nim. Are you not angry?" "About what?" Choi Han hesitated for a moment, and could not continue speaking. Cale shrugged his shoulders as he started to speak. "The fact that he looked down on me? Or how he made such an unbelievable statement to you? How he almost killed that old man and, instead of apologizing, said that he was an obstacle?" Cale's voice was calm and firm. He did not seem angry at all. In fact, it sounded indifferent. Cale continued to speak. "Do you have to keep moving when you see someone in front of you? Why didn't you try to avoid him? Don't you see that you could have hurt the old man? How can you casually say that a person was an obstacle when you almost killed him?" Choi Han paid attention to Cale, who was looking at a faraway mountain range. At the same time, he made sure to listen to Cale's every word. Cale continued to speak firmly. "Vanyan, why is the old man apologizing to you? You should properly apologize to him." Cale could speak like Choi Han, and there were times he wanted to do that. "But I am not someone who can speak like that. Nor do I want to. I'm also not that angry. But this was not the time." Cale knew that this was one of the things that made Choi Han look cool, but he did not want to look cool like that. The old man wasn't injured, and he didn't do anything that would get the blade pointed toward his family. The fact that he himself looked bad would be beneficial to Basin, so it was good anyways. Also, Cale was someone who always returned the favor, no matter how long it took. If someone looked down on him or does something to him, he will always get his revenge. That bastard will probably soon be kicked out of his house. Huh. Choi Han could tell that the bastard Cale was referring to was Vanyan. That was why Choi Han showed a rare shocked expression on his face, as he looked toward Cale. Cale had a mischievous smile on his face. The two kittens, who were approaching him silently, halted their movement. Cale's smile grew larger as he continued to look toward the mountain to the right of the village. He thought to himself the thing he could not tell Choi Han. "I plan on snatching that bastard's dragon. Once the dragon is gone, Vanyan will have to face the wrath of the Marquis, and would have a new obstacle in his way of becoming the family patriarch. Shouldn't someone who doesn't know when to stop on the road face at least one obstacle?" Cale was willing to put a large obstacle in Vanyan's way. Of course, it would be done in secret. He casually spoke to Choi Han, who was looking at him with curiosity. "If you're curious, you can help me out. Whatever it is, I definitely want to help." Choi Han started to smile as well. It was a pretty evil smile for such a good-natured person, but the kittens were intrigued by that smile as well. Cale looked toward the mountain that was supposed to blow up in 3 days' time, and started to mumble. The fact that he was looked down upon by Vanyan, as well as the blood on Vanyan's sleeves and the sight of the old man bowing to Vanyan were all still on Cale's mind. "You won't regret it? He will be able to pay him back for it? You definitely won't regret it?" Chapter 17, Heading Out, 4. "Young master, this is the best room we have. Seems acceptable." The old man led Cale's group to his inn. The exterior of the inn looked as rustic as the village, but it had everything you would need, probably because the merchants visiting the Henituse territory stayed at this inn on their travels. This is the first time we have had a noble staying with us. Please look favorably upon us, even if it is lacking quite a bit, and just consider it as a place where lesser beings live." Cale stared at the old man. He seemed more comfortable than when talking to Vanyan Stan, but he still seemed scared at the fact that a noble would be staying at his inn. It was fine for him to have a little bit of anxiety, but too much was uncomfortable for Cale as well. "It's no good like this." Cale patted the old man's shoulder and tried to calm him down. "Old man. Relax. I don't like people who put themselves down like that. This is the place that people who come and go from our territory stay to rest. There is no way such a place will be lacking." The old man's pupils started to shake. He wet his upper lip with his tongue, before finally starting to speak after a bit of hesitation. "Young master, are there a lot of good people like you in the Henituse territory?" "What the hell are you talking about? I am the biggest trash in our territory. Almost anybody you find will have a better personality than me." The old man let out a gasp. An and Hong, who had taken control of the couch in the room, were meowing and shaking their heads, but nobody seemed to notice. "You can go do what you have to do." The old man bowed deeply at Cale's dismissal and left the room. Cale found it annoying that the old man still seemed to be stiff, but decided not to care. Knock knock knock. Someone else was knocking on the door. "Come in." The door opened, and Deputy Butler Hans brought a small box inside. "Young master, you asked only for this box, right?" "Yes." "Hand it over." Deputy Butler Hans showed curiosity as he handed the box to Cale. It was the only luggage Cale personally brought with him. He would just assume there was alcohol or snacks inside if it was a normal box, but this box was not normal. It was the highest quality magic box with a magic lock on it. The seal on the magic box was the logo of the Flynn Merchant Guild, one of the 3 large merchant guilds, and one that had an intimate relationship with the Henituse family. Cale casually commented while looking at Hans. "Isn't a butler not supposed to show their emotion on their face? Especially curiosity. One of the proper etiquettes of a butler is to show all of their emotions to their master." "Funny man. I guess I am a bit funny." For someone who didn't want to go to the capital other than for the kittens, Hans was a bit impudent, but Cale still thought he was much more personable than the other butler candidates. Seeing Hans starting to get used to him, Cale just responded like normal. "Get out." "Yes, sir." And Hans left immediately, as usual. However, he had a question about their travels before closing the door. "Will we be staying here for 3 days?" "Yes." "Take care of everything." Hans responded as he closed the door. Other than the vice captain taking charge of the envoy's safety, Hans was responsible for everything else. However, he did not show any struggles in doing so, and efficiently took care of everything. "He seems like a good butler." The silver kitten, An, said that as she approached Cale. Cale nodded his head. Then, the red kitten, Hong, followed behind. "It doesn't seem that hard for him either." Cale agreed with that statement as well. Ron was one thing, but other than Ron, Hans was the one who had the least difficulty dealing with Cale. He was scared of Cale, but did not find him to be difficult. "He's a pretty decent butler." Cale brushed aside the kittens coming toward him and opened the box. The method of opening a box with a magic lock was simple. Cale's fingerprint. That was the only key that could open this particular box. Cale put his index finger on the center of the magic seal. Beep. Click. The box made a small noise before opening. Inside the box were the items Cale had prepared during the 4 days prior to leaving for the capital. "I'm really curious about what this is." "Really curious?" Cale ignored the 2 pairs of golden pupils looking at him, and just vaguely answered. "Things that will help rescue a poor soul, screw over some douchebags, and prevent me from getting hurt. An and Hong looked up at him with curiosity, but Cale just caressed the items inside the box with satisfaction. He recalled the conversation he had with Billows, the Flynn Merchant Guild's bastard, before he left. "Young master, just where do you plan on using these things? I don't see why I have to explain that to you." "I see. But it is going to cost quite a bit to purchase all of these items. Is it possible to rent them?" "For you, of course, it is possible." The majority of the items inside the box were magic tools. Cale had expected them to be expensive, but it really was too much. Cale had to use up all of the allowances he had earned from his father. He also had to return it all to Billows once he got to the capital. Annoying. I didn't want to get involved with him at the capital, but I have no other choice. 2 of the items are not able to be rented out to outsiders. I rented them in my name, for you. So you must return these to me at the capital. In person? Sure. Cale grabbed one of the items in the box. It was a round, black orb with a lot of symbols engraved on it. The Red Kitten Hong put his paws on Cale's knee to ask. "Really curious about this?" "A mana disturbance tool. It is worth almost 1 billion gallon." Gasp. Both An and Hong let out a gasp. It cost 20 million gallons just to rent it? Hong slowly lowered the paws that were on Cale's knee, before going toward the corner of the bed with his sister, An. They were trying to keep as much distance as possible from the black orb. Cale recalled the information about the orb. Billows had found exactly the item Cale was looking for. It causes a disturbance in the flow of mana within a certain range, making all magic tools stop working. It is also sturdy enough that, even if something like a mountain blowing up happens, it will not break. Something like a surveillance tool will break right away then. Of course. However, you do need to install this 27 hours in advance. It is created to slowly infuse a force that will disrupt the mana flow so that it will not be noticed by mages. How long will it last? 40 minutes. Isn't it great? Of course, if there are mages nearby, they will be able to resolve the issue within 5 to 10 minutes. I will keep that in mind. The corner of Cale's lips started to go up. It was the most expensive item he rented from Billows, but he will have many uses for it on this trip. I really like how durable it is. The Flynn Merchant Guild was a very useful place. Cale smiled with satisfaction, before throwing this black orb, that was smaller than the size of a toddler's fist, toward the kittens crouching in the corner. "Look. Meow." One of them gasped, while the other meowed and avoided the black orb, but in the end, they had to sit quietly in front of Cale with the black orb in front of their eyes. "You know how to read a map, right?" An tapped her tail on the ground in response. "Of course. We were potential successors to the Fog Cat tribe at one point." "Right. My sister is right." Cale took out another important item, a map, from the box. It wasn't very detailed, just having the general landmarks around the Henituse territory. Most of the merchants going to and from the Henituse territory used this map. "We are in this village right now." Cale pointed to the mountain to the right of the village. "You see this mountain?" "I see it. Very easy to see." This was what Billows had said. "Ah. The range is similar to the durability. One mountain. If you go toward this mountain, you will see a villa in the distance. Behind that is a cave." There were no mages around the Black Dragon right now. The people of the Magic Tower respected dragons as the greatest magic race, and did not wish for humans to torture and domesticate a dragon. They considered it to be a big disgrace to magic. The people around the cave and the villa were knights and soldiers that the Marquis trusted, as well as the people who do the dirty work for them. "Don't go near there at all. You cannot get caught." Cale had heard about these 2 children's situation. That was why he was confident they could do this, but he still wanted to give them a warning. It would be bad if their curiosity led them to go around the cave. There is something being tortured in there. We're going to rescue him, so you have to be careful. Something. Yes. It is even younger than you, Hong. Even younger than me. Yes, 4 years old. Of course, that 4-year-old was strong enough to send An or Hong flying once the mono-restriction chains were removed. We're going to save him. An and Hong's eyes lit up as they pressed down on the bed with their paws. Save? Sure. Just stay in your cat form and go bury this orb in the mountain without getting caught. There should be close to no chance of getting caught in their cat forms. Cale put the black orb in a small pouch, before putting it over An's neck like a necklace. Where should we bury it? Anywhere on the mountain. Really, anywhere. The siblings looked at each other before nodding their heads. Easy. We even managed to get past our cat tribe's elders to escape. Cale agreed with them. It should be easy for the two of you. You two have enough skill for it? I wouldn't ask someone useless to do something like this in the first place. The two kittens looked up at Cale with their golden pupils again. This pair of siblings, who were almost killed by their own tribe for not having abilities, even though they never got a chance to learn, were starting to get emotional. Their tails were wagging, and they crunched their noses to hold back their tears. Cale understood what these two were thinking and sternly continued. I will give you as much beef as you want once you successfully return. The two siblings immediately jumped through the window and stealthily headed into the mountain. Naturally, the siblings did as Cale expected and earned their reward. They were able to have a 10-tier beef steak to themselves. The next day, Cale drank the lemonade that he had now gotten used to drinking, and asked Choi Han. Have you ever seen a dragon? Chapter 18, Saw a Dragon, 1. A dragon. I've seen something similar once. Similar, my ass. Cale knew what Choi Han was talking about when he said something similar. Forest of Darkness. He was talking about the vicious monsters deep inside the Forest of Darkness. Among those terrifying monsters were creatures that were somewhere between lizards and dragons. Choi Han had killed that dragon-like monster as soon as he advanced from the middle stage to the final stage of his dark destruction sword art. You did? How was it? Cale pretended to not know about the event, and asked Choi Han. Choi Han was the only other person in Cale's room right now. It was a monster. How so? Its appearance, its strength, everything. It was a monster in all aspects. Cale nodded his head and continued to speak. But his actions and his words were completely opposite. Then you have not seen a dragon. Dragons are like people. Clack. Cale put the cup with the lemonade that was both sweet and sour down on the table. He then responded to Choi Han, who was looking at him with curiosity. Dragons, beast people, dwarves, elves, they are all like humans. Why? Because they also have emotions and lives. That aspect wasn't important to Cale. His main point started from here. However, Choi Han might have noticed Cale's sudden change in demeanor. He sat up straight and focused on what Cale had to say. Such an existence has fallen into darkness since it was born. The only thing currently lighting up the darkness in its life is torches, and it has never even seen the light of the sun. What kind of life do you think it is having? Tap. Cale tapped the table with his index finger. It is being forced to become an existence without rationality. He tapped on the table once again. It has had to suffer through its loneliness, without any family or anything to lean on. Choi Han's gaze fell every time Cale's finger tapped the table. Choi Han's fists were clenched underneath the table, to the point you could see his veins starting to flare up. Cale did not know about this, as he continued on. It is tortured and abused every day, and is only left alone when it is barely alive. Choi Han's expression stiffened, and anger was in his eyes. Cale knew Choi Han would react this way. There was no way a good person like this would not get angry after hearing such a story. He should also have figured out why Cale brought up such a story in the first place. Cale took another sip of his lemonade, before finishing up his story. And that existence is nearby. A short silence filled the room. Cale looked out the window, before slowly turning his gaze to look at Choi Han. He didn't know what Choi Han was thinking about, but his whole body was surrounded by a bloody aura. Is he getting angry at the fact that it is abused because he is a good person? Contrary to Cale's hypothesis, Choi Han was currently recalling the tens of years he had to survive on his own in the forest of darkness. That was why the silence continued for a while. Finally, Choi Han made eye contact with Cale and asked, "Will you save it and try to tame it? Are you crazy?" Cale acted on reflex, and asked back in shock. Choi Han also became shocked at Cale's questioning his sanity. "Why would I try to tame it?" Cale waved his hand around like Choi Han was crazy. There was no way that a dragon that was abused by humans would be willing to serve a human. In fact, it probably was full of hate and disgust for any and all humans. Even if that human was the person that saved it. Dragons believe that they are above all creatures, including humans. This is a natural instinct for dragons, so, even without being in contact with any other dragon in its whole life, it will still feel this way. That was why dragons cannot grow under humans. This attitude makes it impossible to domesticate and train dragons without using torture and abuse to break down its mind. Dragons are born extremely arrogant. But, most importantly, if I raise a dragon, Cale could feel it. He felt like he would get wrapped up in some annoying incidents if he raised a dragon. There were less than 20 total dragons in the eastern and western continents combined. Raise one of those dragons. That was pretty much the same as saying, I will be at the center of all the happenings of the continents. It was also a dragon that was supposed to die. It would be better for it to go off into its own little world and not get in anyone's way. Cale was definitely against this dragon coming with them. As long as he gets rid of the mana restriction chains, this 4-year-old dragon will live a much better life than Cale. Dragons weren't called the kings of the world since birth for no reason. Then, why are you asking such an obvious question? Cale laughed at Choi Han's question before he answered. Let it go so it can live a free and peaceful life. Shouldn't a dragon live like a dragon? Choi Han's clenched fist slowly started to relax. Then will we be saving that dragon? Yes. So I need your help. Anything. I really will do anything to help. Cale was worried that Choi Han would escalate the situation, and shook his head. No need to go overboard. I have no plans to kill anybody, if possible, either. We will do it as quietly as possible. Cale Nim, you really dash. Choi Han started to speak with admiration, but Cale looked at the clock, before cutting him off and saying what he needed to say. Go tell Ron to prepare some alcohol on the first floor. Diff what? Cale was prepared to drink first. He started drinking even though it was the middle of the day. Choi Han just sat there with confusion on his face while looking around. Everybody other than himself looked peaceful. In the middle of that peaceful environment was Cale Henituse, drinking bottle after bottle. The growing flush on his face made anybody who was watching him know that he was drunk. Is it okay to let him drink so much? Choi Han looked toward Hans, who was next to him, and asked. Deputy Butler Hans was delivering food to An and Hong, who were in their cat form. He still did not know that they were part of the cat tribe. He then refreshingly answered Choi Han's question. Yes. There is nothing in his hand. Thus, it is safe. He promised he won't throw any bottles. Choi Han was talking about Cale's safety, but Hans was referring to themselves. Choi Han just shut up after seeing the conversation take an odd turn, and moved away from Hans. It was better to leave Hans alone when he was next to the kittens. Instead, Choi Han looked toward Cale to make sure he was safe. Owner. Your alcohol tastes great. Much better than I expected. Cale didn't seem to know that Choi Han was looking at him, instead focusing on just praising the alcohol. They had been drinking for 2 hours already. There were some who were not drinking, just in case something happened, but the majority of the envoy was enjoying the festive atmosphere. They were all so nervous for the first hour, tisk. When Cale had ordered them to gather, as he would be drinking, the soldiers showed up with their helmets on. Cale couldn't believe it, but told them that he will not throw any bottles to help them relax. This village may be small, but there are a lot of mountains around it. The alcohol is a special alcohol I made with fruit and herbs from the mountain. That is why it is a bit expensive. As the old man mentioned, the alcohol really did taste great. Cale admired the alcohol, and lifted the bottle up to the old man. Do you have a lot of these? Yes. Quite a bit. Then get some more and send it around to everybody here. Young master, you don't need to dash. The vice captain shouted out with a flushed face, but his eyes were focused on the bottle in Cale's hand. The rest of the soldiers were looking at the same thing. Naturally, Cale was aware of what they were thinking. Just drink. I'm telling you to drink. Got it? The eyes of the soldiers who were present all started to sparkle. It was the first time they became excited to see a bottle in Cale's hands. Cale watched the excited inn-owner bring alcohol and snacks for everyone there with a sharp gaze. Cale Henituse. This human had a strong alcohol tolerance. Everybody thought he had a low tolerance because his face flushed easily and he caused a ruckus whenever he drank, but the truth was that he did all those things without being drunk at all. That was why Cale's head was perfectly clear right now. He drank for another 30 minutes or so before looking toward Choi Han and starting to speak. Choi Han. Come support me. I'm going up to rest now. Young master, I will do it. It's okay. Vice Captain, rest a bit today. The rest of the soldiers as well. Didn't you fight in a battle yesterday? This is not a dangerous area, and I feel bad for the soldiers on guard duty, but the rest of you can relax and enjoy yourselves. Young master dash. I'm tired. Bye. It would become complicated if the vice captain or the others followed him. Thankfully, none of them approached after seeing Choi Han supporting him. It was probably because Choi Han did not drink at all, and was also the strongest person there. They had nothing to worry about since such a person was going to be guarding Cale. Just one person left. It was easy to avoid the guards at the gate and around the inn, but Ron was still left. Hans and Ron would never come into the room if he told them not to come in. However, the difference between the two was that Hans was not skilled enough to know if Cale was still in the room, while Ron was so skilled that he would easily be able to tell if Cale snuck out. It's not like that old man will care about what I am doing. Realistically, Ron would not care whether Cale snuck out and what he did once he snuck out. That was how he had been until now. However, Cale didn't want things to get annoying in the future, so he decided to tell Ron in advance. Seeing Ron follow behind Choi Han, Cale quickly informed Ron. Ron, I'm going to go out to play. It's a secret. Got it? This old man liked to drink, but did not drink a single drop tonight. Instead, he was just staring at Cale all night. He really was a scary person. This benign smile that Ron was giving him right now was even scarier. I understand. I will be waiting for you. Don't wait for me, my ass. As expected, Ron agreed without saying anything else. Cale continued to be supported by Choi Han as he went into his room. I'm going to be resting. Hans, Ron, don't come in to wake me up unless it is an emergency. You know how I get when someone messes with my sleep, right? In the past, a servant received a barrage of swearing when they had to wake Cale up in Ron's place. Although Cale did not physically hit anybody, that servant went around the estate telling all the other servants about how he felt like he was hit by a flurry of swear punches. Of course I do, young master. Please rest well. Young master, this Ron will be standing right outside your room. Cale's expression stiffened at Ron's response, but he watched the two of them leave, before stealthily giving an order to Choi Han. Use the windows to quietly come back to my room. Choi Han nodded his head and quickly followed the other two out of the room and closed the door. Is it time now? Cale nodded his head at An and Hong, who followed him up to his room, and immediately opened the box. Click. The magic lock clicked open, and Cale removed an outfit from inside the box. Once he finished changing, Choi Han entered through the window, and then his eyes opened wide in shock. Cale Nim. Before putting on the mask, Cale threw the black outfit in his hand toward Choi Han. You wear it too? The orb from yesterday should temporarily stop the magic recording devices, but that was not enough. Cale did not want to get caught. That was why he had been drinking since the middle of the day and prepared these outfits. What is this? The black outfit had a single red star and 5 smaller white stars surrounding it on the chest area. What is it? The outfit of the secret organization. The Birth of a Hero novel clearly and accurately explained the outfit of the secret organization that Choi Han runs into time after time. This outfit was specially ordered by Cale following the explanation as accurately as possible. Just to be on the safe side, Cale even had the outfit created separately, and personally added the stars. That was why it was a bit crude up close, but it was pretty decent from a distance. People who see this outfit will not remember the crudeness of the stitching, they will just remember that it was a black outfit with 1 red star and 5 white stars. For Vanyan, who has not personally met the secret organization like the Marquis did, the report from the subordinates who saw this outfit will definitely give him a significant headache and anger. Are we doing something bad? Choi Han asked once more after seeing Cale not respond. Seeing Cale with the black mask on as well definitely made him seem like a villain. Yes. We are doing something bad. Cale started to smile underneath the mask. We're doing something bad to Vanyan. Choi Han seemed to finally understand, as he quickly pointed to the other mask in Cale's hand. Please give it to me. Even good people will have someone they don't like and want to screw over. That was no different for this 17-year-old, who spent tens of years alone in this world. Ah, and these kids are from the cat tribe. They are beast people. Cale casually introduced An and Hong to Choi Han as if it was nothing, and they just simply exchanged greetings as well. The cat tribe children, who were sensitive to a person's true character, already had a good idea about Choi Han's strength, and Choi Han had noticed they were not your average cats during their travel. He's Choi Han, this is An, that is Hong. End of introductions. Everybody get ready. There was a short time to get ready before Cale ordered Choi Han, who had just come out of the restroom wearing the same black outfit and black mask. Let's go. He then added on, as he stood in front of the second-story window. Carry me when you go out the window. I can't jump so far down without getting hurt. Choi Han let out a sigh for the first time in front of Cale. An and Hong approached Choi Han and patted him with their paws to console him. Cale urged them on once again. Let's hurry. The group that safely exited the inn headed for the mountain with the Viscount's villa and the dragon's prison. Chapter 19, Saw a Dragon, 2. The location that the kittens, An and Hong, buried the black orb was out of Cale's expectations. The Viscount's villa was 30 meters away from the dragon's cave. An and Hong had buried the black orb 50 meters away from that cave, in an area filled with trees and shrubs, making it very difficult for the orb to be located. You two are kind of amazing. Something like this is a piece of cake. An was saying it was easy, but Cale could see An's nose twitching in joy. Cale, Choi Han, An, and Hong crouched around the location that the black orb, officially known as the Mana disturbance tool, was located, and looked toward the cave entrance that was 50 meters away, as well as the Viscount's villa that was farther away. You remember the plan? Cale had explained the plan on their way over. Realistically speaking, There wasn't much of a plan. There are a total of 6 people on guard at this time. Cale recalled the information he read in The Birth of a Hero. The black dragon was smart, like most dragons. It had been gathering information for the 4 long years it was held captive, and there was a reason it attempted its escape 2 days later at around this time. There were, approximately, a total of 30 people residing in the villa. Originally, there were close to 100 people, but it slowly went down as they realized during the last 4 years that nobody really came to this area. Of course, among the 30 people, there were 3 high-leveled knights at the vice-captain's level, as well as 7 mid-leveled knights. There were also soldiers, the torturer, and random laborers. The number of people here showed just how much attention the Marquis has been putting onto this location. However, Cale had Choi Han. Choi Han was someone who could take down the strongest knight in the Roan Kingdom in 10 moves. Someone like that was on their side. Let me explain one more time. There is 1 high-leveled knight and 2 mid-leveled knights at the cave entrance, as well as 2 soldiers. Inside the cave, there is just 1 high-leveled knight, and the torturer is at the end of the cave. Choi Han flinched after hearing the word torturer, but Cale did not care. Cale did not care to know about the things that were going through Choi Han's mind right now. The important thing was that the black orb will activate soon, and that they needed to move quickly in response. The magic recording devices located from the villa to the cave entrance will not work for 40 minutes thanks to the black orb that An and Hong buried. That is the same for the alarms, magic traps, and anything else. Nothing will work for 40 minutes. They needed to domesticate this dragon, the greatest magic-using creature in the world, but they could not ask any mages for help. That was why Marquis Stan chose to fill this area with magic items instead. The reason that there were only a few guards around the entrance was also because they trusted their magic items. That was why the dragon had no choice but to cause a mana explosion to escape. An eye for an eye, and money for money. Since the Marquis used money, Cale used money as well. Cale patted the magic bag on his waist. This was a magic bag that allowed you to store a lot of items. Inside this bag were all sorts of magic items, useful tools, and objects. I just need to take out the guards. Naturally, Choi Han would be doing the battling. Why would Cale even try to fight when such a strong person was next to him? Cale thought paper cuts hurt a lot, so he didn't WA.